Hello everyone, it's Tracy. Welcome back to my channel. Thanks very much for joining me. So today I'm doing a tutorial to make a mini album spool using the Viewmaster reel die from Nicole Silhouette here on YouTube. Here is what my finished one looks like, and the idea came from a blog on Pinterest called Authentic Paper, which I shall link below. So I just showed you there the die, and what you need to do is cut that die out 10 times. You then need a piece of card which is 5 1/4 inch by 2 inch and scored on each side at 1/8 of an inch. I then put some score tape along there and cut those triangle notches out on both sides, and I'm just training the cardstock there for later. For the film strips, I have 4 cut out here, which is what I used on my original one, but I only ended up using 2 for this tutorial. The die I used is from Holtz Alterations, and it's the film strip frames, and it's a thinlits die. I'm not sure if it's still available, but there are other film strip dies available on the market that you could use quite easily for this project. I went ahead on all the die pieces, the die cut pieces, the 10 of them, and put a little mark where I knew where those little holes at the top and the Viewmaster squares all lined up exactly, because they don't actually line up on each of the points around. So you just need to spend a few moments making sure that they do line up before you glue them down, because it makes it a little bit easier with the glue, makes it less messy. So I'm just gluing together 2 here, and what I'll be doing is 5 each end of the spool. It's a nice thickness, making it sturdy. The one that I made previously was only 3 layers thick on each side, and I felt that to be a little bit too flimsy. You kind of want it to have it at the chipboard thickness. So I'm just gluing my 3rd one there. And then I'm going to move on to making the actual centre of the spool. So I've got the centre piece of the spool here, and I'm going to remove the release tape and bend it around into a cylinder. Just training it a little bit so it will curve nicely without creasing. So once I've got this cylinder joined together, it's time to assemble the first end piece. So I'm putting those 3 pieces that have glued together onto the end of that cylinder, and I'm pushing down the notches along the score line there just to get them trained. I'm going to remove the release paper to expose the adhesive. Once the adhesive's exposed, I'm pushing those notches back and then pushing down that end piece onto the exposed adhesive, making sure it gets a good grab. And then we can glue our other 2 pieces on top of. So I'll put adhesive on the back of the first piece that goes on top. Lining up as before with that mark so that it lines up nicely. And this gives that end or the centre piece that strength that it will need. Don't worry about it being a little bit messy through there, because we're going to cover that up and you won't see it. So I'm just going to glue down the last piece for this first end, and that will make this 5 layers thick of cardstock. The glue I'm using is Tombow Mono adhesive. So I'm just lining that up with the mark to make sure everything's lined up nicely. Press that down. And that's our first end on. And we're going to go ahead and do the same for the other end. Just going to get my pieces sorted, clean up, and I've got 5 pieces left. So I'm going to join 2 together like before. And I'm just going to apply the third piece here, lining it up with the mark. And I've already popped it over the end of the cylinder, and I'm training those notches along the fold, and then I'm going to pull that piece down onto the exposed adhesive. And you can see it's starting to take shape now. So I'll put adhesive on the back of the first piece that'll go over the top of that. Pressing it down. And then we'll glue the last piece on. This comes together quite quickly. What you could also use as your inner of your spool is you could use that cardboard tube that is with paper towel and some of the food wraps. I tried with mine and they weren't the right size, so I've decided to make my own inner cylinder, but you could try. So moving on to covering up those holes, I've got my stitch circle die set here, and I'm just looking to see which size is going to be better to fit over that hole, and I've gone with the smallest one of that set. And it measures 1 3/4 of an inch in diameter, and that covers that hole exactly. So I'm just going to put adhesive, a thin line of adhesive around that little edge there, and also on the cut circle, and put that in place over that hole. And do the same on the other end. So I'm just here gluing down that last circle in place to cover that hole, and that's our spool part of it done. So just set that aside to dry. And it's looking good with the 5 layers on each end, nice and sturdy. So we're moving on to the film strip part of it now, and I have 2 film strips here, this first one. And you could actually add more on depending on how many pictures you want on your reel, it's up to you, but for this tutorial I'm only using 2. I've got some pieces of cardstock here, we'll pretend these are photos. And depending on which film strip die you use, it will depend on what size these pieces are. Mine are about 3.5 centimetres by 3 and just over 3.5 centimetres. And I've glued them into place. And you can see on the back there it looks a little bit messy. So with the other film strip, I'm going to glue that to the back. And that gives it a nice finished look, which is what I've done here. But what I did notice is I didn't like the way the cardstock was showing through those little dips at the top there, so I ended up trimming those out, which I thought looked a lot better. Again, it'll be up to you with what film strip die you use. So it's time now to stick this to the spool, and I'm just using Tombow Mono Adhesive liquid glue. And I'm going to position it over that seam on the spool just to hide it a little bit. And I'm going to press it down into place. Whilst I'm waiting for the glue to set up and grab, the film strip will need to be trained a little bit to be curved, and that will take a little bit to get it to go around and to make sure the glue doesn't pop apart. So just spend a few moments training the cardstock so that it knows that it's got to bend around. And if the glue does pop apart, don't worry, just pop a little bit more in there, that'll be fine. So I'm just wrapping that around, training it as such, making sure it stays pressed together. And and it's time now. You could secure this in any way you like. I think with my one, or I know with my one, I did it with ribbon and a press stud. This time I'm just using a piece of baker's twine. But you could get really creative. You could probably do magnets as well if you wanted to. Just depends on how much fluffing around that you want to do with your mini album here. So I'm just trimming the edges of the baker's twine, and there we have it, all finished. And you can decorate it any way you like. You could use distress inks. You could really give it a different look for whatever. Wedding, baby, friendship, whatever you like. I do hope that you give this mini album project a try, as it is lots of fun to make and quite easy to do. Don't forget to check the description box down below for the links to the products I have used, and I will try to link some alternative film strip die options for you as well. Here is my film strip spool that I made earlier, and I did my strip twice as long to accommodate 16 photos, but you could make it as long as you like. Thanks very much for watching today. Have a great day, and till next time, bye for now.